recording this session this evening, and we'll send out the recording to you via email after we get it up at the end of the week. I'm now going to introduce Madhavi, our historian of 6th District PTA.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session of our speaker series. My name is Madhavi Gupta, and I serve 6th District PTA as the historian. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Susan Stone, our speaker for tonight. Susan Stone, coach, speaker, and author, is a certified special education teacher with decades of experience working with children and families. She has presented hundreds of talks to Bay Area groups, focusing on healthy communication and effective discipline for all ages. Susan's wide range of professional experiences include operating home-based preschools, teaching teenagers with emotional and behavioral problems in juvenile hall, and managing crisis hotlines for parents and teens. Susan, mom to an adult son and daughter, is the author of Real Parents, Real Kids, Real Talk, a book for parents with children of all ages. Susan, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Madhavi. It's so nice to be back. I was here a few months ago, and so it's so nice to be back with the parents of the 6th District PTA. We're here kind of at an exciting time. This has been some exciting news has broken this week with President Biden announcing that teachers are going to be vaccinated. So maybe that's a topic that can come up. I've been encouraging parents all year to anticipate being home this entire school year. So we'll see what happens. Different schools are going to go back at different times, but we will certainly see, what happens and how that goes. But I'd be curious to hear from some of you how it is going. What we know is that some kids are really thriving doing virtual learning, and some kids are not. Some kids are really anxious to go back to school. And my children are adults. They are out of the house. They do not live with me anymore. So I certainly don't know exactly what it's like having kids at home. What I do know is that I have wonderful admiration for all of you. This has been a tough year. We're going on a year now. This has been a very tough year, and you really are all doing a terrific job. I think some of you are laughing right now. Maybe you feel like you're not doing a terrific job, but of all the parents I work with, and I work with dozens of parents a lot all the time, I think that parents are doing really well. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen. And then, as Eric said, if you have any questions about what I'm asking, please put it into the Q&A. And then I'm not going to speak for long. I want the majority of our time tonight. We have 1 hour tonight, and I want the majority of our time to be with questions. So at the end, if you have a question about something I'm saying, or a question just about parenting in general, it doesn't necessarily have to be about our topic tonight. Probably somebody else will have the same parenting questions that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do my PowerPoint presentation, and we will go ahead. So what we're talking about tonight is supporting children in our changing world. And what we know is our world has certainly changed. Hopefully, maybe it'll get back to what it used to be, but there might also be some real changes that we keep going with. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so first of all, what I want to do is to start our seminar before we get into that real topic with my parenting goals. And I've been giving parenting talks for about 15 years, and I always start off with this concept that no matter what age your child is right now, that our goal, the goal of parenting, is to raise a successful adult. So we're not actually raising children, even though they might be 4, they might be 8, they might be 12, they might be 15, but really what we're trying to do is raise a successful adult. So in order to come up with that definition of a successful adult, I ask you to ask yourself, What do you want your child to be like when they are 21 years old? We call them adults at 21 because they're finishing college, they're moving out of the house, they're legally drinking, and that's when we think of them as being adults. But I do want to remind you that the human brain is not done developing until more age like 25 or 26. And the last part of the brain that develops is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that helps us to stop and think and make a good choice. So if you look at your young one and you think, wow, they're not stopping and thinking and making good choices, it's because they have an undeveloped brain. They're not quite there yet. We're good at that. We have a fully developed brain, and we're better at stopping and thinking. But I do want you to ask yourself what you want your children to be like at age 21. And when my son Brandon was born, I'd been working with children for 16 years already. I have quite a bit of experience working with kids. And when he was born, I said on his 21st birthday, I want him to be honest and kind and responsible and capable and close to me, to be emotionally close to me. And that's what I want to work on. And that's what goals I have for my child. So, of course, what is the way that you teach those traits and those values? How was I going to make sure that Brandon became an honest, kind, responsible, capable kid? Well, I'm going to recognize that I'm their role model. I'm going to recognize that my child is watching me all the time, and they are learning from me, not just from my words, but more so from my actions. So every minute that I am with my child, it was true then, and he's 36 years old, and it's still true for me today. When I am with my kids, I am the person that I want my child to be, and I act the way I want my child to act, because our kids are watching us and they're learning from us. And so just be the person you want them to be and act the way you want them to act. And the third part of my goals of parenting, and this is what my whole book is about, Real Parents, Real Kids, Real Talk, is this page right here, is for us to remember that everything, including values and skills, has to be taught. So I need to teach my kids to be honest and kind and responsible and capable. And I can't really wait till they're 21 to teach them those things. So I'm going to teach them now, no matter what age your child is. Start teaching them now. A silly example is that we taught our kids how to cross the street. They probably didn't cross the street by themselves until they were 8, 9, 10 years old. But when they were 2, we were saying, look both ways, use the crosswalk, hold mommy's hands, push the button. We were teaching them to cross the street long before they needed to do it by themselves. So I think that successful adults know how to handle disappointment. So we need to start teaching our little kids how to handle disappointment, so that by the time they're 21 and they're living alone and they're doing it themselves, they've learned how to do that. Okay, so now let's get into the topic at hand, which is how do we help our kids during this changing world? How do we support them? So I have now 9 screens. So I'm going to give you 9 different tips to share. And the first thing is that to remind you that children like structure. They like rules. They like limits. They like boundaries. For any of you who have been on the school campus, when we used to go to school. We're going to go again. We used to go, but remember back to when you used to go to school. And the bell would ring for the opening of the school, and the kids would run to line up and stand in line, and they knew exactly where to go and exactly where to stand. Kids like structure and routine. They might not verbally ask for more structure, but if their behavior is a little bit out of control, I often think that's their way of saying, I need a little more structure. I need some more boundaries here. Okay, so we want to keep the routines in place. And what we know is that everything is easier with a schedule and routine. Again, think back to the school day. It starts, and I'm making this up because every school is different, so bear with me. It starts at 9, and then at 10 they know it's math class, and at 10:30 it's recess, and at noon it's lunchtime. Kids and teachers do better with a schedule and routine. So there's all kinds of things that you can put into place even though you're home in this changing world. So what time do they go to bed? What time do they have to turn the lights out? All these things here. If you can have a time for them, it's much better. If your kids know that dinner is at 6 o'clock every night, it's just so much easier to have dinner ready at 6 o'clock every night. Okay. And everybody knows that dinner's going to be served at 6. So I urge you to try to come up with that. I recommend you use a timer. Timers can be really good. So you say you can have 20 more minutes of screen time. Set a timer. When the timer goes off, the 20 minutes are up, and that's it. And as I said here, it's really hard to argue with a timer. If they look at me and go, no fair, I can go, hey, the timer went off. It's not my fault. So use a timer. And another way of parenting is to think about using the phrase, first we do this, and then we do that. Okay, so that helps us to keep a routine going. The second tip I want to give you is just, pretend this is 1985. My son was born in 1984, and we had one desktop computer at home. That was it. So I want you to pretend it's way back then. And I know our kids are on screen time. I know at the end of this, I'm going to get lots of questions about screen time. But right now, just pretend we don't have so much screen time. And so we're looking to be outside. Our kids can play outside. It's safe for them to go outside, masked and distanced, of course, but it is safe to be outside. I also want you to think about using TV viewing time as family time, and it doesn't count against your kids' screen time. I love watching television with my kids. So sitting down and watching a TV show together, it gives us stuff to talk about, and it's bonding time. And so that's something to do. We can use more old-fashioned kind of toys, and your kids might roll your eyes when you say, let's get out bubbles and let's get out puzzles. And I'm sure you've been doing some of that, but that's a good thing. And then, of course, more letter writing and more phone calls. We didn't have texting back in 1985. We didn't have emails, I don't think, back in 1985. So just kind of, it's another way to support your kids. Just think of ways to get away from screen time, because the kids are on the screen so much, and we want them to have a little more time off of their screen time. Another thing, and this is close to the routines, is I want you to start making plans. We are getting vaccinated. We are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It might be another 6 months or so, but start making plans. I love those desk size calendars from Home Depot. Office Depot, excuse me. I always kept one on my desk. I would let the kids see it. I would write each kid's activities in a different color. So my son was blue and my daughter was red. But most importantly, you're showing your kids that you're feeling optimistic. That's how we support our kids, by letting them know, you know what, it's going to be okay, and we're gonna make some plans, and we're gonna put them down. I said put them in pencil. Maybe you can put them in different colored pencils, but make sure that your kids see that you're making plans. And we can talk about birthdays, and we can talk about holidays. You can start planning them together. It's always with the caveat with our kids, though, that plans can change, because that has nothing to do with COVID or our changing world. That's just the truth. Plans change. But I think it's good for us, and I think it's good for our kids to start seeing that we can make some plans. Teaching our kids to be optimistic is a really good trait. I didn't mention it earlier, but it's probably one of those traits that some of you said, yeah, I want to teach my kids to be optimistic. So making plans and writing them down and talking about them is a good way to teach that optimism. Another idea here, we gotta help our kids stay connected with friends. We're all very concerned about the lack of socialization that our kids are getting. Social and emotional learning is also known as SEL, and it's very important. And kids learn a lot of SEL, social and emotional learning, while they're in school. And they use it to feel connected, to feel part of something big, to work on their social skills, such as being polite and to share, to learn learn more about emotions, to understand how other people feeling emotions, and for us to learn and teach our kids to be empathetic, and of course to have fun. So you've all done a really good job this past year of helping your kids to be connected online. But what I'm asking you now to do is to think about, and I understand, my husband is a pulmonary physician, and I've been studying, COVID since it started well over a year ago. And I understand that every family has different dynamics. You live with different people. The different people you live with have different health needs. And I understand that. But it is time now that can begin to think about how can our kids actually connect with friends. I know for myself personally, I have one couple who they come into our home. They don't come in the house. They come into the backyard. We sit in the back and we eat dinner, and we eat socially distanced. We get takeout so no one's touching each other's food. But it makes me feel good to see people in person. So perhaps what you can do, and perhaps some of you are already doing this, you have a family friend who has a child your child's age, and you're beginning to slowly get together. Kids have to be masked. You have to be physically distanced, but it's safe for kids to go on a bike ride. And our kids need to start seeing their friends in person. So again, I don't want to take away the fact that we all have different safety needs for our own families. But if you can start to think about what are some ways that my kids can be with a friend in person, I think it's going to be helpful. It's also going to be really helpful because they are going to be going back to school soon, and we want to give them some more practice at being with their friends in person. So just another tip to how we can help our kids in this changing world. Another point that we want to make sure is we want to keep our kids informed within reason. I don't know the ages of all your children. I'm guessing we have some of you have children as young as 2, and some of you have children who are teens. And obviously, the amount you tell the different ages is quite different. But please understand, your kids are listening. They know what you're saying. They know what you're stressed about. They hear what their friends are stressed about. They're paying attention to news more than you realize. So we do want to be honest with our kids, honest within reason, right? We don't tell them more than they can handle. But if we just go, no, 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 it's no problem at all. No, 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 nothing's wrong. They know we're not being honest. So we do want to keep them in the loop. We do want to let them know what we've heard and what we think might be happening. You're always considering your child's age, but it's always true that they know more than we think and they hear more than we think. So we want you to keep them informed within reason. Oh, here's a good one. You're all going to like this one. I'm giving you permission to say yes more often. I know I put here a little more often. I was tempted to put a lot more often. It's okay to say yes to that extra treat. It's okay to say yes to more screen time. It's okay to be a little bit more flexible. We need to understand that another 20 minutes or another TV show or another half hour is not really going to matter. And sometimes it's just not worth the fight. I was working with a family because I'm a family coach. So that means I work individually with families. And I was working with one boy, and the parents had said, if any grade drops below a C, there is no computer time for you tonight. And one grade dropped below a C, and he said, but I don't think that's right. I think it's a mistake. And the parents said, we don't care. It's below a C, and you can't have your screen time tonight. And it just became a really ugly evening. The son didn't feel like his parents were being fair. There was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of tears. And sure enough, the next day, he spoke to his teacher, and his teacher said, oh, no, that was totally a mistake. Your grade is an A, not below a C. And I tried to point out to the parents that in that instance, maybe they could have said, we trust you, we're going to believe you, and we're going to say, yes, tonight you can still have your screen time, but you have to resolve it tomorrow. And if you don't resolve it tomorrow, then it'll be no tomorrow night. But that's a great example of where if the parents had just said yes, it would have been more fair to the child, and it simply would have been a better evening. So I'm giving you permission. I've been working with children for about 40 years, and I'm giving you permission to say yes. It's okay. No one will think anything less of you, and your kids will appreciate it. Okay, another tip is tied into that. You got to pay attention to your own needs and feelings. And maybe I should have kind of made this be, the first point. I often think that parents are the fulcrum on a scale. So if you picture a scale, you're that middle part, and you can't balance your family and your partner and cooking and work and your kids. You can't balance any of that if you are not okay. So just like on an airplane where you're told to put on your mask first before you put on your child's, that's what we feel here. I want you to take care of yourself, um, so that you can take care of your kids. And you're pretty important. Your kids deserve healthy, happy, strong parents. And if you're giving your kids everything, then you can't feel that way yourself. And I definitely want you to feel that way. And also, I think it's really good role modeling. I think it's great role modeling when you say to your kids, you know what, I'm really tired and I don't feel like playing that game right now. I'm going to sit here and watch you do it, but I don't feel like playing. So please don't think badly of yourself for saying yes. And please don't think badly of yourself for saying you need a break or saying you need some time off, because it's really important. And I know, again, you're laughing, going, time off. I don't know how you're going to find that time off, but please do, because you need to take care of yourself in order for you to take care of your kids. And then the final thing I want to say here is talk a little bit about communication. This is my 9th tip, is to communicate in new ways. And first of all, I want you to listen and talk with your kids the same way you want them to listen and talk with you. So first of all, that means you're role modeling, like we talked about. You're role modeling good listening. You're role modeling good talking. And also what I mean by that is be yourself. I think sometimes as parents, we put on the parent blinder and we say, what should the parents say right now? And the truth is, it's kind of okay to say, what would Susan say right now? So just talk to your kids the same way you talk to other people in your life, and listen to your kids with the same respect that you listen to your friends or that you listen to your partner. And again, you're role modeling really appropriate behavior here. So first of all, I want you to talk less and listen more. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we're going to use them proportionately. Your kids need to be heard. They all have a lot to say, even our quiet ones. They all have a lot to say. And so we need to be the ones to listen to them. And for those of you who have kids younger than teenage years, you want to teach your kids, I'll listen. I will listen to whatever you want to talk about. So talk less and listen more. We have to be empathetic. We have to look at our child's point of view. You have to let them know you get it, even if you disagree. So if they go, I hate school, instead of saying, no, you don't, you can say, must be hard to feel that way. Let them know you get it. Once they feel heard and understood, then they're better able to listen to you. Okay, so we have to make them feel heard and understood. I want you to know that statements are better than questions. Kids don't like it when we grill them and question them over and over again. So just make statements. And here's an example. Instead of saying, what did you do today? Because the answer to what did you do today is nothing, right? Because that's what your kids say. So don't say, what did you do today? Say, tell me one thing you did today. And what's funny is that when I work with kids, I say to them, when you get home from school, your parents are going to say, what did you do today? So when you go through your day and something interesting happens, go, aha, this is that one thing I'm going to tell my parents when I see them later, because they're going to ask me. Okay. So tell me one thing is better than that big, broad question. The best places to talk with your kids are in side by side activities. So I used to say in the car, we're not in the car as much as we used to be, but that's a side by side activity. During meals is a great time to talk with your kids. Uh, my at bedtime is actually my favorite time to talk with kids because they're sleepy and they're winding down, and when you sit down next to them, as I did for many, many years, when I tucked my kids into bed, we would do the whole bedtime routine because I like routines. And then I would say, now let's talk about your day. And that's when they would talk and talk and talk because they figured out that the longer they talk, the later they can stay up. So they like to share a lot at bedtime. And the final thing I said here is you got to talk when they're ready to talk. So many times we want to talk and they're not ready, and it bugs us. And then later on, they come and want to talk, and we're like, no, I don't feel like talking now. No, no, no. We can't be that way. We need to talk when they're ready to talk. And the final thing that I want to say about communication is I used to be a terrible yeller. I was a horrible yeller. I came from a very dysfunctional family. My father went to jail when I was 4 years old. My mom became a very angry woman, and she yelled and yelled and yelled and yelled. And I said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a mommy and I'm not going to yell. And then I grew up and I became a mommy and I yelled because we act like our parents. And so I acted like my mom, who was a yeller. And one thing that I did to help me learn not to yell was I put a rubber band on my wrist and I wore it for like 6 months. And every time I started to yell, I would snap it. And every time I saw it, it reminded me that I was working on not yelling. But the second thing I did was when my child started doing something that made me angry, I would take a deep breath and I would take a step back and I would say, that's not my kid, that's my neighbor, because I would never yell at my neighbor. If my neighbor was doing something I didn't like, I'd be like, yo, dude, you know that's not okay. Please stop doing that. But with my own kid, it would push my button and I would yell. But yelling doesn't work. So my final piece of communication advice is just to try not to yell, even though I know life is stressful. And then the final thing that I want to say here is just, we're living in unprecedented times. And, talking with somebody can be really, really helpful. Here is my contact information. I offer 30-minute free consultations to anyone who emails me and wants to schedule something with me. So I'm hoping that will get sent out in the email that goes out tomorrow. But please, 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 if you don't get your question answered tonight or a new question comes up tomorrow, just shoot me an email and we can do that half-hour free consultation. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing. And now we're going to come back and we're going to see, thank you for putting that in the chat. Okay, and now do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. And in fact, I'll go first. I have a couple of questions. I wasn't able to put it in the Q&A because I'm on the panel, but it's amazing. Thank you so much. I learned so much just listening to you in the last few minutes, and you made me feel so much more normal because, there's a lot of self criticism that we as parents end up, subjecting ourselves to. So the couple of questions I had were.
So hey, let me make that comment. So thank you for saying that, and I think that's so important. As parents, it's something we do to ourselves too much. We question what we're doing. We look at our neighbor. We see what they're doing. We're so worried that we're not doing something right. We're so worried that we're making mistakes. We're so worried that we're not being perfect parents. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. What there are parents who are trying hard to be the best people they can be, to do the best job they can be as parents, and to teach our kids to be the best they can be. And if we're striving for perfection, which is this mystical, magical thing that doesn't even exist, that's not the right way to role model our kids, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the ability to do something or to say something wrong, and then to at bedtime say, earlier today, I raised my voice and I shouted at you, and I'm really sorry. I'm going to work harder on that. What wonderful role modeling that is. To me, that's being the person you want your child to be, and that's acting the way you want your child to act. So if I can do anything with all the parents I work with, it's to help them realize that we know you're doing the best you can, and just keep doing the best you can. And some days we make mistakes, and some days we're better than others. But you know
Sure.
what? Some days our kids make mistakes, and some days they're better than others, and we love them anyways.
Thank you,
Right?
thank you. So a couple of questions. So the role modeling, as you'd mentioned, and the structure and routine. Okay, as you were speaking, I was wondering. Let's say we messed up the last 8 years or 10 years. Is it too late to start? Like I have a sophomore child, right? So is it too late to start, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's such a great question, and it's never too late. It's one of my favorite phrases. It's never too late. And I'm well aware of that. I literally have been teaching this whole idea about role modeling for, well over a decade, close to 2 decades. And I feel so strongly about it. It is never too late to start thinking about, what do I want my child to be like when they're 21? I encourage every single parent on here, if you have a parenting partner, to look at your parenting partner either tonight or tomorrow and say, what are those traits and values we're trying to teach? But it's never too late. And with your son, who's a sophomore, is he a sophomore?
Yep.
I would go to him and say, you know what I heard, on this talk tonight? I heard this woman say that I should be the person I want you to be. What do you think about that? Do you think Dad and I are doing that? Do you think we're being good role models? What a wonderful conversation. But it is never too late to start
Awesome.
being the exact kind of parent that we want to be.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. The first question is a scientific query. What are the scientifically based parameters for an outdoor dinner? How close can people sit when they are eating?
Yeah, so it just depends on how big a group, right? So you want to be with a small group. You're absolutely right. If you can be 6 feet apart. So I have a regular sized table in my backyard that I've set up a second table. So we sit at one, we sit at one, and 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 our friends sit at the other table. So if you can be 6 feet apart, at least 6 feet apart. We keep our masks on while we're talking. We don't take our masks off until we're eating and drinking. So I think what you're striving for is the same 6 feet physical distance. Okay. And to wear a mask as long as you can, and then again, not to kind of share the food. You don't want to have the big bowl of salad that you pass around to everybody. So that's why we get takeout, and they have their food, and we have ours. But it is safe to do that. And of course, you can say to your kids, if you want to have a friend over for a backyard picnic, you need to sit 6 feet apart, you need to wear a mask, you need to use hand gel before we eat. So we want to use all the science that we know of how to stay safe. But it is great for our kids to start having some in-person connection with friends.
Awesome.
They're lonely, and we want them to get together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Our next question asks, we care for an elderly relative, so we are not able to mix with others in person. My 11-year-old daughter is an introvert by nature. She's doing independent study for school. She does not like Zoom interactions because it forces her to be the center of attraction, which is uncomfortable for her. I have offered to set up a Zoom call with a good friend, but she always says, no, thanks. Should I make her meet a friend on Zoom, or can I just say okay and hope that once life goes back to normal that she'll be able to interact with friends normally?
Yeah, such an important question. And there's a lot of kids who feel that exact same way. I work with several children who say, I don't like Zoom because I feel like I'm the center of attention. Like right now, looking at our screen, I see me and I'm half my screen. And a lot of kids feel very, very uncomfortable with that, especially our children who are introverted. So no, I absolutely would not force a child to Zoom. I think, though, that there are interesting things. Maybe that child, well, especially an 11-year-old girl, maybe she wants to suggest that a friend, they each read the same book, and then they could have a book club meeting. So as opposed to just, let me set up a Zoom so you and your friend can chat, this introverted 11-year-old is kind of like, oh, I don't really like doing that. I don't like just chatting. But I know girls who are doing this, who are setting up book clubs. I know a lot of kids who are setting it up so that from each of their houses they're watching the same movie, right? They turn a movie on their television, but then they're on Zoom. So they're watching a TV show or a movie and they're chatting about it. So there are lots of different ways that kids can be, connected. Um, and also, I totally respect the fact, and I hear that some of us have elderly people living with us. Some of us have, medically compromised people living with us. But I wonder if the idea of the 11-year-old taking a walk in the park, just walking to the park for 10 minutes with a mask on and having the friend meet them in the park so they walk around the park. I also know that a lot of girls, especially girls, um, Target is open. I know girls who have their parents drop them off at Target for 20 minutes. And they go into Target wearing a mask. They wander around. They come out in 15 minutes. They get in the car. They use their hand gel and they go home. So if we really think hard, we can maybe get some creative ideas going. But no, I would not force your 11-year-old to do any kind of Zooming. She'll do that when she's comfortable.
That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you so much. Our next question is, yeah, thank you. What can we do with a pre-tween who is now more anxious during the pandemic? What tools can I teach her?
Yeah, so can I ask how old that child is? The one can
I
I?
A pre-tween, so I guess just before the tweens, I get
I've
teens.
never heard of a pre-tween. I like that. I so for those of you who maybe aren't sure, a tween is really, a kid right before they become a teen. But some of our kids at age 8 are acting like a tween, right? Some of you are going, I have a 4-year-old who acts like a tween. So a tween is just that wonderful stage, and it is a wonderful stage in between like childhood and teenhood. And I always think that, those kind of kids have one foot in each world. Like a toddler has one foot in the baby world and one foot in the kid world, right? And then there's kids, and then there's tweens who kind of have that one foot in the kid world and one foot in the adult world, in the teen world. A lot of our kids are very stressful right now. And so we can help our kids who are feeling anxious and feeling stressed by talking, by literally scheduling a time, maybe at bedtime, you talk every night. Um, Kids who are feeling anxious right now, helping them to write things down, that can be very effective. I think that we have to recognize that it's actually kind of normal to have some anxiety right now. We all have some anxiety, so we want to share that. So for the parents of a child who's feeling anxious, to validate that, and again, to empathize and to say, I can understand why you're feeling stressful. We don't really have to worry about the level of anxiety unless we see that the anxiety is interfering with our kids' life. So if the anxiety is keeping them from eating the same way they used to, or keeping them from sleeping the same way they used to, or they're in tears every single solitary day several times instead of just once a day, which is what it used to be. In other words, if your child's personality is really changing, that's when we think, maybe I need to do something more. Maybe I need to reach out and talk to somebody about the anxiety. But it is normal to feel anxious. And if we can help our children through that anxiety ourselves, and we realize they're still sleeping okay, they're still eating okay, they're still talking to grandma when she calls once a week, then a certain level of anxiety is appropriate. It's when it's interfering with their life that we might want to consult with somebody else.
Thank you. We had a question in the chat, so, and you'd be the best person to answer that. Are we able to share the slide deck, the presentation? I know the recording is something that all participants will be receiving, but would you like to include the presentation?
Yeah, so I would be able to send the words. I'm not going to send the whole slide with the pictures and the whole presentation. But if somebody wants to get the words from my pages, I would be happy to put together a handout and send that out. But I see that the family who asked that, I'm not going to say their name, but the family who asked that, please note that this is being recorded and that everybody is going to be sent the recording following this. But to that person who wanted that, you feel free to reach out to me in an email, and I'd be happy to send you the words.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm getting a lot of appreciation in the comments, so thank you very much once again. Anonymous here says, amazing presentation. When my 10-year-old sticks to routine or schedule, or doesn't stick to a routine or schedule, should I give rewards and consequences?
Great question. So I love the words consequence, because a consequence, I want to back off and say, is not a punishment. Okay, a punishment is my kid does something I don't like, so he's sitting at the dinner table and he kicks his sister under the table, and I go, that's it, you've lost dessert. Well, that's a punishment. If I'm sitting at the table and my son kicks his sister under the table, and I say, if you do that one more time, then there's no dessert tonight. Then my son can, as we said earlier, stop and think and decide if he wants to kick his sister and lose dessert, or if he wants to not kick his sister and get dessert. Okay? So a consequence is because I've told my child what to expect. So I do think that that's fair. I don't believe in punishing children. On an adult level, a speeding ticket is a consequence. It's not a punishment. Because if I get a speeding ticket, I know what the rule is, and I know that I could get a ticket, and I chose the speed, and so I got a ticket. So that was my choice, so it's a consequence. So for this parent who said, should I give my child rewards or consequences? If you want to give your child a reward, you can, but I don't really want your child to follow the routine because they're going to get a reward. I want your child to follow the routine because they get an intrinsic reward, right? As opposed to an extrinsic reward. So I don't want my child to follow the routine because he gets, a candy bar when he does it. I want my child to follow the routine because it feels good when mom and dad look at you and go, thank you for following our routine. Thank you for having your teeth brushed on time. And then your child feels good because that's an intrinsic reward. There certainly can be a negative consequence. You certainly could say, if your teeth are brushed, by 8 o'clock, then you can stay up an extra 5 minutes. If you want to do that kind of reward, you can. You also can say, if your teeth are not brushed in 5 minutes, then there's not going to be any time to read stories tonight, right? So you can do it that way. If you can simply have the routine be followed without a reward or consequence, it's better. But I understand that sometimes they're not doing it. And so if you feel that a reward or a consequence will be helpful, remember also there's positive consequences for good choice and there's negative consequences for bad choices. So give your kids a choice. Let them choose. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if my child makes the choice I don't want them to make right now? And if you can live with that, then they can too.
We
Okay?
have a, yeah, sure. We have a follow-on question, comment to that. Regarding the consequence, I heard that it has to be related. I don't see how not getting a dessert is related to kicking sister.
Yeah. So I love that you asked that. And just the way you phrase that, it doesn't have to be related. It might be, it's good if it's related, but I'm not that smart. I can't always think of the consequence that relates to it. So to me, I would probably say dessert because we were sitting at the dinner table and because dessert is coming. So you're out to the parent who asked that, you are 1,000% correct. It's better if it is related. It's also better if it's timely, right? So that's another reason why I might use dessert at the dinner table, because it's timely. What you don't want to do is have your child do something at 10 a.m. and say, that's it, you've lost dessert tonight. Because, 7 hours later, they're not going to remember why they're not getting dessert tonight. So you're absolutely right. It should be related and it should be timely. But again, I wasn't always that clever. My kids, when they were little, the only technology we had really was television. That's what they were motivated by. So that was a consequence I used a lot. But I didn't use it as a takeaway. What I said to them is, lights are out at, you need to get into bed at 8 o'clock. And before you go to bed, you have to finish your homework and brush your teeth and lay out your clothes for tomorrow and have your backpack ready by the door. Once that's done, you can turn on the television, but it's going off at 8 o'clock. So if you finish all that work by 7, you can have an hour of television. If you finish all that work at 7:50, you get 10 minutes of television. Your choice, right?
Right.
Hurry and do what's expected, and then you get a bigger reward, even though it's not really a reward, it's just life, right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes. So we're getting into some harder questions, like how to best repair our relationship with our kids once they start, asking, saying really hateful things like, I hate you guys, or I don't want anything to do with you guys. And, and then they shut themselves away. And given that professional help is quite expensive, are those signs that it's time to seek counseling? And is there anything that you'd like to recommend?
So I can't say for sure that that's time for professional help. Um, what I would say with me, if I was coaching that parent, like I would say, well, let's think about what's happening and let's figure out ways. I think that it's important for us to recognize that when our kids scream and yell, I hate you, they're just unloading. They have no one else to yell that at. So maybe they're mad at their math teacher, or maybe they're mad at COVID, or maybe they're mad because a friend said something mean on Zoom, but they can't yell at their math teacher or COVID or friends, so they tend to yell at us. Kids act their worst where they feel the safest. And where they feel the safest is at home with us. So, as with an earlier question, I don't believe it is ever too late to repair our relationship. I would not get angry with my child for saying, I hate you, and they go in their room and slam the door. I'd give them a little bit time, and then I'd go and knock on their door, and I would say, hey, let's talk about that. You know, it actually makes me feel bad that you're feeling that way about me. So let's talk about it. But certainly, I think it is good advice. And to that parent, I give free half-hour consultation. So give me a call and let's talk about it and let's see what we can come up with.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's going to be super valuable. Thank you for doing that. So the next question we have is, any advice for young adults, college age kids or college grads even, who are having difficulty because this year has kind of limited or actually curtailed their social life, and they're living in communities they haven't even met. So
Yeah, such a tough time. I work with several kids right now because I work with all ages. And it's funny because we go, oh, poor high school seniors, they lose out on their prom and their, graduation. Well, you know what? It's really hard for kindergartners who have never been in school before. And they're like, I thought I was excited about school. Every age is hard. It's really hard for our young college grads. They fought so hard to get into college. They worked so hard. They got accepted. They got into college. And the whole reason we told them, which I don't believe, but too many of us tell them this, that you've got to get a degree in order to get a good job. And they've worked so hard and they have the degree and now there's no jobs. And they're stuck back at home with their parents, even though they've been living independently on campus for 4 years. It's really, really a tough age. And what we just have to do with that age, again, is help them figure out how can they get out? How can they begin living their life a little bit now that other people are getting vaccinated? It's still going to be a while for them, but President Biden said by the end of May, they're going to be vaccinated. So we just need to be supportive. We need to understand with all of our children that at every age, this is a challenge. But I fully recognize, I mean, I'm literally coaching right now with 6 different people who are in that age group between the ages of 21 and 26. And they are struggling. This is hard. They also thought that this was the time they were going to start living their life and have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they can't meet anybody. So it's a tough time, and I respect that.
thank you. Thank you. So we have a question about a perfectionist student, right? So here's a parent that has a child that does not want to turn in homework unless it's perfect. And this stresses the child, and, it's obviously, disturbing the parent. And how can parents help in this situation?
Yeah, just so there's 2 different things going on there, right? So we have lots of kids who are perfectionists, and it's funny because some of the parents on here are going, I wish my kid was a perfectionist, right? Because some kids are turning in homework and that's just absolutely terrible, and they don't care, right? So we really get that wide range of kids. With that child, what we have to say, the rule is that homework is turned in, and please trust me, I'm making this up. Homework is turned in by 8 o'clock at night, whether it's perfect or not. So you have until 8 o'clock to work on it, but then it needs to get turned in. And I think that what we can do as parents is we can role model and we can share stories about times that we weren't perfect. So we can at the dinner table say, well, I had this report that was done today, and I only got it about 90% done, but I went ahead and turned it in anyways because my boss wanted it. So, in other words, we can talk about times that we're not being so perfect. But also, so what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between being a perfectionist, which is something we can help our kids recognize. And when kids went to school and brought home papers, I would say, don't just hang up the A+ papers to display. It's okay to hang up a piece of paper that actually had a couple wrong so that our kids see that we're not expecting perfection from them. But then the other part of that is not turning it in until it's perfect. And that's not okay. You got to turn it in. So it has to be done and turned in by a certain time. That's that routine. That's that structure. And they're going to have that time. But it is difficult for our kids who are perfectionists. And, sometimes we have to look at our kids and we see personality traits that we don't like because they remind us of our other parent and the other parent, and we hope they weren't going to get that trait. Or maybe it reminds of ourselves and we hope they weren't going to get that. So for the parents who wrote, we have a child who's a perfectionist, I would say, well, which one of you is like that? Because my guess is that child has a parent who is trying to be perfect, because a lot of us want that. But the truth is that when we try to be perfect, we're actually giving a bad lesson to our kids. And we want to own up to our own mistakes, because it's good for kids then to own up to their mistakes.
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, this parent also mentioned that we are expected to, we need to recalibrate our expectations because it's COVID. And that led me to think, now that we're at the final stretch of COVID, hopefully, when kids get back to school, so how do we manage the transition of changing expectations, which we might have curtailed, we might have modified them a little bit to suit this environment, but we have to get back to normal. So
yeah, so I think it's a conversation depending on the age of the child, that you can start having conversations about, we think we're getting closer to school. We don't know if that's going to be April 1 or May 1. This was my tip of keep them in the loop, right? This is a great example of that. Let them know, but we don't know exactly when they're going back. But you could start having those conversations, again, depending on the age of the child. We're not going to tell our first grader, you might go back in 3 weeks, you might go back in 3 months. That's too confusing for them. But for the older kids, we can say, we're beginning to talk about going back to school, and we should think about what that's going to look like. And, what time did you used to get up? So in other words, instead of you just saying, well, you're going to have to start getting up at 7:30, you can say to them, when we were going back to school, do you even remember what time were we getting up? Because, we're going to have to start getting up at 7:30, even though now we can get up at 8:30. So I think starting to have that conversation with your kids, instead of just trying to, lecture to them or tell them what it's going to be like. I am very big on talking, in case you can't tell, but I'm big on talking with our kids. So we can say, hey, I'm hearing that school might be starting. What do you think about that? And what do you think is going to feel like to go back to school? And when do you hope? We don't know when, but what do you think that's going to feel like? And how different is that going to be? And we'll have to talk about what our structure is going to be like, because routines are going to change once we go back to school.
absolutely. Thank you. Those are great tips. And I think our final question for tonight is, I let my 10-year-old have media for entertainment during break and lunchtime. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah. So I mean, everybody has to do what feels right to them. I would try to get them off of media during breaks and lunchtime, because they're on it all day long. And when they go to school, right, during breaks and lunchtime, they're running around, they're playing, they're interacting with friends. So my own recommendation, even though I recognize that every single parent on here has to do what feels right for them, my own recommendation is that breaks and lunchtime is time for a break and lunchtime. And you can give them more screen time at the end of the day. If your son says, no fair, because I get to play a game for half an hour, well, then give him an extra half an hour after school. But for me, breaks and lunchtime, they need to be off of screen time. The other thing that I would recommend is that when school ends, we're taking a half-hour break. We're pretending it's 1985 and we're doing something different, because we all recognize that our kids are using screen time more than we want. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't still be putting a little bit of structure and routine around that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I just want to share my thought. What I do with my high schooler is he's so ready for lunch. I'm like, take a quick jog before you get to lunch. That way it gives me that kind of few minutes to kind of fix his lunch, so I don't feel stressed juggling work and, so that, I think that's something that works as well. The outdoors is so much important, in this situation during
And
COVID.
even if they don't go outside, I mean, they just need to get up and they need to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom and they can go pet their dog and
Yeah.
they can go make their own lunch. I mean, if they start school at 8 o'clock and they don't get off school till 3 because they're on for breaks and lunches, that's just way too much time. And everybody, not everybody, everybody needs to get up and move. And so hopefully we can do that. I know we'll have to wrap up. I just want to remind everybody, please, please, please feel free to reach out to me if your question didn't get answered. I want to thank you all so much for being here. You
Thank you,
guys
Susan.
are working from home. You're on Zoom all the time also. And it's so wonderful. What I know after giving parenting talks for 15 years is that only good parents come to parenting talks. So I know that we're talking to a group of wonderful parents here, and I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. There's one final question that popped in. Do you think we'll be able to take that?
Sure.
Okay. My 13-year-old boy keeps asking for screen time to do homework or study, but often doing YouTube instead. What should we do if we don't give
Yeah.
him?
So hopefully kids should be, and I know this is hard because some people's homes are small, and I get it. It's better for kids to be doing school in a public place where you can see. And so he's right. He does need to be online for homework. Ideally, he's only doing homework and not YouTubing. But again, for that boy, um, is he doing okay? Is he getting good grades? Or is his YouTubing interfering and preventing him from completing his homework? If he's doing his homework just fine and yet looking at a YouTube video and then bouncing back to homework, so if he's doing okay, I wouldn't worry about it that much. You certainly can say, if you want, we have a family rule. There is no YouTubing during homework time, but recognize how hard that is to monitor. So for me, I would be more likely to say our expectation is that your grades are the same as they, normally would be, that your grades aren't falling, and that if he's YouTubing a little bit but keeping his grades up and getting his homework finished, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank everyone on behalf of 6th District PT. I'd like to thank each and every one of you that was here tonight. Thank you very much, Susan. This was awesome. We have next week, we have another seminar called Tackling Technology. So we look forward to seeing you then.